Ladies and gentlemen, I come before you today with a message that might sting, but it is one that can save your life. It is a truth we often ignore, but if we embrace it, it will set us free. Have you ever met someone who seems to walk straight into disaster time and time again? They ignore warnings, reject wisdom, and make the same foolish choices over and over. Perhaps that person is closer than we think. Maybe, just maybe, that person is you. Now, don't be quick to dismiss this message, because the fool never sees himself as a fool. He believes he is wise while the world shakes its head in disbelief. But today, if you have the courage to listen, if you have the strength to face the truth, you might just escape the very traps that have ruined so many before you. So let me reveal to you the 5 undeniable signs that you are an idiot person. 1, ignoring wisdom. The first mark of an idiot is rejecting wisdom. Wisdom calls out, but the fool refuses to listen. Parents warn their children. Teachers try to guide students. Elders share their experiences, but the foolish person covers his ears. He believes he knows best, that he has nothing to learn from others. But the road of foolishness always leads to destruction. 2, refusing to learn. Ignorance is not a sin, but choosing to remain ignorant is. Every wise person was once unwise. The difference? They were willing to learn. But the fool, he rejects correction. He refuses to grow. He says, I am fine just the way I am. And so he stays trapped in his own blindness. 3, speaking without thinking. Words have power. The fool speaks before thinking, blurts out nonsense, and destroys relationships with careless words. He is quick to argue, quick to accuse, and quick to defend his pride. But a wise person, he listens before he speaks. He measures his words carefully. 4, repeating the same mistakes. An idiot never learns. He falls into the same trap again and again, making excuses instead of changes. The wise person stumbles, yes, but he gets up and chooses a different path. But the fool, he stays in the cycle of destruction. 5, pride and stubbornness. Pride is the most dangerous of all. The fool is blind to his own foolishness because his pride won't allow him to see it. He is stubborn, refuses to admit he is wrong, and will go down with the ship rather than change course. But humility, it is the beginning of wisdom. Now, my friend, I ask you, did you see yourself in any of these signs? If you did, don't run from it. Embrace it, because the fool remains a fool by refusing to change. But the wise humble themselves, seek wisdom, and choose a better path. Which one will you be? The choice is yours. There is a kind of blindness that is more dangerous than the inability to see with the eyes. It is the refusal to see with the mind. Many people live in this world not because they lack intelligence, but because they reject growth. They do not hunger for wisdom, they do not thirst for understanding, and they do not desire to be taught. They build walls around their minds and call it strength, when in reality it is weakness. A fool is not someone who knows little. A fool is someone who refuses to learn. The path of wisdom is not given to the privileged or the naturally gifted. It is open to anyone willing to seek it. Yet many turn away from this path, thinking they already know enough. They resist correction because it bruises their ego. They avoid teachers because instruction feels like an insult. They dismiss advice because they do not want to admit they might be wrong. When someone shows them a better way, they do not see an opportunity, they see an attack. They believe that changing their mind is a sign of weakness, when in truth, it is the greatest strength a person can possess. The refusal to learn is not just about education, it is about life itself. It is about relationships, work, character, and decisions. A person who refuses to learn does not just fail in the classroom. They fail in their marriage, in their friendships, in their careers, in their faith. They repeat the same mistakes because they do not stop to ask what went wrong. They blame others, circumstances, even fate, but never themselves. They think life is unfair when, in reality, life is only responding to their unwillingness to grow. Wisdom calls out in every situation, but the fool ignores it. When trouble comes, the wise person asks, "What can I learn from this?" The fool asks, "Why is this happening to me?" The wise person listens to correction and improves. The fool resents correction and stays the same. The wise person humbles themselves and seeks guidance. The fool boasts in their ignorance and calls it independent. The wise person understands that learning is not a one-time event, but a lifelong journey. The fool believes they have already arrived. If you close your mind to wisdom, life will teach you in ways you will not like. The lessons will come through failure, heartbreak, and hardship, not because life is cruel, but because you left it no other way to reach you. The fool learns only when the pain becomes unbearable. But even then, many will still refuse to change. They will shake their fists at the world instead of looking in the mirror. They will stumble over the same obstacles, make the same poor choices, and walk in circles, all while believing they are moving forward. Learning requires humility. It requires the courage to say, "I was wrong." It requires the strength to accept that you do not know everything. The one who refuses to learn is not just standing still, they are moving backward. Words have built nations and destroy empires. They have healed the broken and wounded the strong. Every word that leaves our mouth has power. It can bring life or bring destruction. Yet the fool does not understand this. He speaks without thought, without caution, and without wisdom. He believes that because he has something to say, it must be said. He mistakes noise for knowledge, volume for value, and arrogance for authority. His words flow freely, but they do not carry the weight of wisdom. Instead, they scatter carelessly like seeds in the wind, taking root in places he never intended, causing harm he never foresaw. The fool is quick to speak, but slow to listen. He interrupts before hearing the full story, assuming he already knows the answer. He does not pause to consider the impact of his words, nor does he weigh them before letting them loose. He fills the air with empty chatter, gossip, and reckless opinions. He speaks in anger, unaware that his sharp words are cutting deep wounds into those around him. He argues not to understand, but to win. He speaks not to enlighten, but to impress. He confuses loudness with influence, mistaking the echo of his own voice for wisdom. In moments of frustration, the fool lashes out. He does not control his tongue controls him. He insults when he should show grace. He curses when he should remain silent. He escalates conflict instead of diffusing it. His words are like arrows shot in haste. Once released, they cannot be taken back. He may later regret what he has said, but by then the damage is already done. A single careless word can destroy years of trust. A single moment of anger can sever a lifelong friendship. And yet, he does not learn. The fool speaks, apologizes, and then repeats the same mistake again. The wise person understands that words once spoken cannot be erased. He listens before he speaks. He considers the weight of his words before letting them leave his lips. He understands that silence is sometimes more powerful than speech. He does not rush to respond in anger or pride, but instead chooses his words carefully. He knows that wisdom is often found in restraint. A fool speaks first and thinks later, but by then it is too late. His words create enemies where there could have been allies. They build walls where there could have been bridges. They bring division where there could have been unity. And yet, he never stops to ask himself, is what I am about to say necessary? Is it true? Is it kind? He believes that his words should always be heard, but he fails to see that wisdom is often found in listening rather than speaking. A person who cannot control his words will eventually lose control of his life. What he speaks will come back to him, whether in honor or in regret. But by the time he realizes this truth, it may already be too late. A wise man stumbles but rises again, learning from his fall. A fool, however, trips over the same stone, walks the same crooked path, and falls into the same pit over and over, never realizing that he is his own greatest enemy. There are many who believe that life is unfair, that fate has cursed them, that circumstances have worked against them. But the truth is, it is not life that is against them. It is their own refusal to change. They do not learn from their past. They do not reflect on their failures. Instead, they repeat them, convinced that the next time will somehow be different. The fool goes through the same relationships, the same financial struggles, the same conflicts, and the same personal failures without ever stopping to ask, why does this keep happening? He blames others for his misfortunes. He blames luck, timing, even the people who try to help him. But he never blames himself. He does not see the pattern, or if he does, he refuses to admit that he is the one creating it. He refuses to acknowledge that his habits, his choices, and his mindset are leading him in circles. He becomes trapped in a cycle of failure, not because he is destined for it, but because he refuses to break free. There is nothing wrong with making mistakes. Everyone falls, everyone fails, everyone gets things wrong at some point. The difference between the wise and the foolish is that the wise stop, analyze, and change. The fool, on the other hand, rushes forward, convinced that his way is right, even when history has proven him wrong time and time again. He does not listen to advice. He rejects correction. He resents those who try to help him. And so he remains stuck, watching others move forward while he stays behind. Some people go from one bad relationship to another, saying, I always end up with the wrong person, never considering that their own choices, attitudes, and expectations might be part of the problem. Some struggle financially for years, blaming the economy, the government, or bad luck. Yet they continue to spend recklessly and ignore wise financial principles. Others face constant conflicts in their workplace, friendships, or family, never realizing that their own words, attitudes, and pride may be the reason relationships keep breaking. The fool repeats his mistakes and convinces himself that he is simply unlucky, when in reality he is simply unwilling to change. Life will always present lessons, but it is up to the individual to learn from them. Those who refuse to change will find themselves facing the same hardships again and again, because life does not move forward for those who are not willing to grow. The cycle of failure is not an accident. It is the result of an unteachable heart. Those who are willing to learn will find wisdom, progress, and success. But those who refuse will remain in the same struggles, trapped by their own unwillingness to grow. There is no greater barrier to wisdom than pride. A proud person is blind to their own faults, deaf to correction, and hardened against change. They see themselves as the wisest in the room, the most capable, the most intelligent. But in reality, pride is the very thing that keeps them from true understanding. Stubbornness locks them in their ways, making them resistant to growth, unwilling to admit wrong, and incapable of learning. It is not their lack of intelligence that destroys them. It is their unwillingness to humble themselves. A fool would rather lose everything than admit they were wrong. They will continue down a failing path, refusing to change course, even as the walls close in around them. They will reject wise counsel, dismiss good advice, and fight against those who try to help them. They believe that changing their mind is a sign of weakness, but in truth, the strongest people are those who are willing to listen, learn, and adjust. A wise person understands that they do not have all the answers, but a fool believes that their opinion is the only one that matters. Pride is deceptive. It whispers that you are always right. It tells you that no one understands you, that you do not need anyone else, that you are above correction. It makes you defensive when someone points out your flaws. Instead of reflecting, you attack. Instead of considering, you dismiss. Instead of growing, you remain stuck. Pride makes a person unteachable. An unteachable person is doomed to repeat their mistakes. The stubborn person cannot accept help. They refuse to ask for directions when they are lost, both in life and in their decisions. They would rather suffer in silence than admit they need guidance. They see humility as weakness, when in truth it takes far more strength to admit fault than to pretend perfection. A humble person can be taught, can be molded, can be led to success. But a stubborn person, they remain in their struggles, choosing failure over the discomfort of change. Pride isolates. The person who is too proud to admit wrong will eventually push others away. Their relationships suffer because they refuse to apologize. Their careers stall because they reject feedback. Their growth is stunted because they believe they have already arrived. They do not see that the very thing they hold on to so tightly, their pride, is the thing that is holding them back. They fight to prove themselves right, but in the end, they only prove themselves foolish. The downfall of many great people was not their talent, not their intelligence, not their opportunities, but their pride. It blinded them to their faults, made them stubborn against wisdom, and led them to destruction. The greatest leaders, the wisest individuals, and the most successful people all have one thing in common: humility. They understand that growth requires change, and change requires the willingness to admit that you do not know everything. The proud remain in their ignorance, but the humble rise above it. Wisdom calls out to everyone, but not everyone listens. It is not hidden, nor is it reserved for a special group of people. It is available to anyone who is willing to seek it, embrace it, and apply it. Yet the fool ignores wisdom, dismissing it as unnecessary, inconvenient, or beneath them. They walk through life refusing to take advice, rejecting correction, and making the same errors that countless others before them have already made. They believe that they know better, that they do not need guidance, that their way is the right way, until the consequences of their choices come crashing down on them. They listen to their parents, their teachers, their mentors, and even their critics, knowing that wisdom can come from many sources. But the fool resists all of this. They cover their ears when truth is spoken. They turn away from those who try to help them. They see correction as an attack rather than a gift. They mistake stubbornness for strength and independence for wisdom, never realizing that the very thing they are rejecting is what could save them from failure. Ignoring wisdom is not just about refusing advice from others. It is about refusing to learn from life itself. Every failure, every hardship, every mistake is an opportunity to grow, but only if a person is willing to learn from it. The fool sees failure as unfair, as bad luck, as someone else's fault. They do not stop to ask, what can I learn from this? They repeat the same bad decisions, thinking that somehow this time the outcome will be different. They refuse to examine their own behavior, their own attitudes, their own choices, and so they remain trapped in a cycle of foolishness. There are people who have seen others ruin their lives through bad decisions, yet they follow the same path. They have witnessed marriages crumble due to selfishness, yet they refuse to change their own ways. They have seen others lose everything because of poor financial decisions, yet they continue to live recklessly. They have watched people destroy relationships through anger, pride, and arrogance, yet they refuse to control their own tongues. The lessons are all around them, but they do not pay attention. They close their eyes to the truth, and in doing so, they walk straight into disaster. Life is full of warnings, gentle nudges at first, then louder alarms, and finally, painful consequences. Wisdom is always speaking, but the question is, are you listening? A person who ignores wisdom is like someone who refuses to read road signs, driving recklessly toward danger. They may laugh at the warnings, mock those who try to guide them, and think they are invincible. But sooner or later, reality will catch up, and by the time they finally realize the truth, the damage may already be done. There are many things in life that people fear: failure, rejection, loneliness, loss. But perhaps the greatest danger is the one that most people never even recognize: the danger of being a fool without knowing it. The most dangerous person in the world is not the one who lacks knowledge, but the one who believes they are wise while making foolish choices. They walk through life convinced they have it all figured out, blind to the fact that their own mindset, their own stubbornness, their own pride is leading them straight into destruction. A fool does not wear a sign that says, "I am foolish." No, they believe they are intelligent. They believe they are strong. They believe they are making the right choices. But all the while, they are walking in the wrong direction. They reject wisdom when it is offered. They ignore correction when it is given, and they repeat mistakes while blaming others for their failures. They refuse to learn, refuse to listen, and refuse to change. And the worst part? They don't even see it. How do you know if this is you? How do you know if you are walking the path of foolishness without realizing it? The fool never believes they are the fool. But there are signs, clear, undeniable signs, that reveal the truth. And if you are brave enough to look, if you are willing to face the truth, you might just save yourself from the consequences that so many before you have suffered. There are 5 signs that expose the fool, 5 warning signals that show when someone is walking in ignorance. These signs are not hidden. They are clear, they are obvious, but only to those willing to see them. The question is, are you willing to open your eyes? Or will you ignore the truth, dismiss the message, and continue down the same road? The choice is yours, but understand this: those who reject wisdom will eventually learn the hard way. Some people think they are too smart to be a fool. Some think their experience, their intelligence, or their success protects them from making bad choices. But the reality is, the fool is not defined by how much they know, but by how much they refuse to learn. It is not ignorance that destroys a person, it is arrogance. It is not lack of intelligence that ruins a life. It is the unwillingness to listen to wisdom when it speaks. So, I ask you again, could this be you? If you are quick to say, "No, I am not a fool," then I urge you to listen carefully, because the person who is least willing to examine themselves is often the one who needs this message the most. Do not assume that you are beyond foolishness. Do not assume that you are immune to bad decisions. Take this opportunity to reflect, to open your heart, and to consider the truth before it is too late. Because wisdom is calling out to you, but the question is, will you listen? Foolishness is not about intelligence, it is about attitude. It is not about what you know, but about whether you are willing to learn. The greatest tragedy is not making mistakes, but refusing to learn from them. A fool does not lack opportunities to change, they ignore them. They are given wisdom, but reject it. They are warned, but refuse to listen. They repeat the same mistakes, convinced that life is against them, when in reality, they are the ones standing in their own way. The 5 signs are clear: refusing to learn, speaking without thinking, repeating the same mistakes, being ruled by pride and stubbornness, ignoring wisdom. If you see these signs in your life, you have a choice: continue down the same path or turn around before it is too late. No one is beyond change, No one is beyond wisdom. But the first step is humility, the willingness to admit that you do not have all the answers. The fool remains blind until disaster strikes, but the wise see the warning signs and change their course before it is too late. Which will you be? Will you hear this message and dismiss it, thinking it does not apply to you? Or will you take a moment to reflect, to examine yourself, and to make the changes necessary to walk the path of wisdom? Because here is the truth. You don't have to be a fool. You don't have to keep making the same mistakes. You don't have to live in ignorance. You can choose wisdom today. You can choose to learn, to listen, and to grow. The choice is yours. But understand this. If you ignore wisdom today, do not be surprised when life teaches you the hard way tomorrow. So what will it be? Will you wake up, or will you walk away unchanged? The decision is in your hands.